I wore my first military style uniform when I joined a Sainik school, a military school in Kerala, before I hit double digits in age. After wearing that uniform for 8 years, I wore the uniform of the National Defence Academy for 3 years, and thereafter the white uniform of the Indian Navy for 36 years. That means for 47 out of my 58 years on planet Earth were in uniform. My father served the Indian Air Force for 38 years. So that means you can technically say that I was born into the world of uniform. And my son has already been in the whites of the Navy for the last 13 years. So with that kind of deep association with uniform, I should be the last person expected to hold forth on unconventionality. Maybe that is being unconventional. Unconventionality is a great asset in the armed forces, because prudence tells you that the best of plans can survive only till the first contact with the enemy, and thereafter impromptu innovation based on the facts on ground, sometimes, in fact most often, without even full information, what is called the fog of war, is the norm, and unconventionality helps us in that. It's only an intelligent commander who understands that missiles, ships, helicopters, radars, tactics are all just pieces on a chessboard. Unless they are innovatively used, they are of no use. Now, there have been great military leaders in history who have won great battles, overcoming great odds. And one name that towers very tall among them is of Lord Nelson, Admiral Lord Nelson. Lord Nelson's zenith came at his victory at the Battle of Trafalgar in 1805, where he fought the combined fleets of Spain and France. All put together, Nelson had about 33 ships, and the Franco-Spanish fleet had about 40 ships. At the end of the day, when the battle was over, the British had not lost a single ship, whereas the Franco-Spanish fleet had lost more than half. 21 ships captured and 1 ship destroyed. The Franco-Spanish force had lost almost 16,000 people dead or injured, whereas the British had lost hardly 1,600. And the fun is that at the beginning of this battle, Lord Nelson had got shot by a French sniper, and he was at the bottom of his ship, bleeding and dying. And at the end of the day, after someone whispers into his ear that the battle had been won, he died. Now, how did this happen? How did this asymmetric victory become possible for a weak British force against a strong Franco-Spanish fleet? And that too when their leader, Admiral Nelson, was not there to lead them. That is because at Trafalgar that day, Admiral Nelson employed absolute unconventionality. In those days, ships of the line, big fighting ships with sail, used to have their guns mounted only on the sides. That means they could only fire sideways. They could not fire ahead or behind. So, when two fleets fought, what they would do is that they would form straight lines, one after the other, and then engage the enemy who is in a parallel line on either side. Now that day in Trafalgar, as the Franco-Spanish fleet started forming a line when they realized that the British were close, Nelson did not do that. He did not form a parallel line, and instead he cut his line into two and went at 90 degrees towards the Franco-Spanish line and cut them into three. That straightaway took the first 1/3 of the Franco-Spanish line out of the battle, and those were the ships of sail. They couldn't have turned easily, and even if they had turned, they couldn't have fired, because the French and the Franco-Spanish ships were now in a melee and fighting. And Nelson's forces thereafter engaged the enemy closely. They jumped into their ships and they killed them, and they captured their ships and defeated them. That's how this incident was possible, because of absolute unconventionality employed by Nelson that day. Now, almost everyone is born unconventional. We have our personal traits, but those have to stay with you as you grow up so that these things flower. Nelson also, in his childhood and his early teenage, had all the classical reasons which psychologists say, which brings in people a craving for glory, for success, for offensive. He had all that. But that is not enough. You also need to have a setting. The setting came in the form of incessant wars between Britain and France. There was the 7 Years' War from 1756 to 1763, then the American War of Independence, then the French Revolutionary Wars, and finally the Napoleonic Wars. So Nelson was lucky. He had his personal traits, and with all these wars, he also had his setting. But that was not enough. The service had to have a fighting spirit. Unfortunately for the British, from 1700s, they had been weighed down by formal fighting instructions and their fighting spirit had been dulled. They had insipid leaders and they fought indecisive battles. And all that was set to change. A trigger that was required soon came during the 7 Years' War. During the 7 Years' War, in 1757, Admiral John Byng, who was commanding a squadron of ships in the English Channel, was told to proceed to Minorca, an island in the Mediterranean, a British island in the Mediterranean, and to ensure that it does not fall to the French. Now, Admiral Byng and his ships had been at sea for some time and he is low on repairs, he was low on provisions. So he asked the government, he asked the Admiralty for help, but they told him this is war, you need to go fast. So he comes, he goes to Gibraltar, he approaches the governor at Gibraltar and he still doesn't get any aid and he finally lands up off Minorca. When he lands up at Minorca, they realize that the French had already landed on the western side of Minorca Island and they were slowly proceeding towards the east where the British garrison was. So Admiral Byng has a little meeting with his captains of the ships with him and they decide that it may not be worth fighting now that the French had already landed. However, just when they decided to leave the place, a French squadron, which is matched in numbers with the British, appeared there and the French gave battle. Naturally, Admiral Byng lost that battle and went back in shame to England. And when he reached England, there was much public outcry and there was this famous slogan, "Swing, swing, Admiral Byng." They wanted him hanged. So Admiral Byng was taken into custody and they started a court-martial. And the charge against him was not doing his utmost. His personal bravery was acknowledged, but they said the charge was that he had not done his utmost and hence lost that battle. Unfortunately for him, the court-martial upheld the charge. And when this charge was upheld, the only punishment possible was death. And unfortunately, Admiral Byng was shot dead as a result of the court-martial's verdict. It was a shocking incident. It shocked the service, not just in Britain, but everywhere else in Europe too. 2 years later, the French philosopher and writer Voltaire, in his satire Candide, wrote that in this country, that is in Britain, they considered it good to kill an admiral from time to time just to encourage the others. Those were the times. But the result of Byng's death was that it changed the British Navy. Now there was an offensive spirit. Now they had a bunch of rash, mean, cruel commodores and captains at sea. They knew that they had a free hand in battle, but they also knew that if they did not use that free hand, the hand wouldn't be there. The result was that the British Navy became benchmark for naval warfighting, and their officers understood that combat is a free and wild thing that needs extemporization. However, it's a fact of life that no great event, nothing in this world can change everyone. It is not that the British Navy entirely transformed. There were still insipid leaders and there were still indecisive battles. It's just that those who were indulging in that were being caught and punished. Now Nelson had his traits. He had the setting through wars, and that offensive spirit in the service came through Admiral Byng's death. But then even that is not enough. You need to have like-minded people as your bosses all the time. And luckily for Nelson, in his crucial years, when he was senior, when he fought his famous battles, he had like-minded bosses above him. He had Admiral Hyde Parker in the Battle of Copenhagen, who told Lord Nelson that he must withdraw. He made a signal and told Nelson to take a look. And Nelson very famously took his telescope and put it to his blind eye and said that he could not read the signal. And he did not withdraw. and he fought and he won that battle. There was Admiral Jarvis, who was his commander-in-chief, who loved Nelson for his offensive spirit. That is because Lord Jarvis, who was a young captain when the time Admiral Byng was shot, had grown up in that offensive service, and he was also the same variety who loved glory, who loved action, and who stood by the truth, whatever be the challenge. So now Nelson had the right bosses too. Even that is not enough. Nelson wouldn't have survived. It's true to say that, it's right to say that Nelson wouldn't have survived in today's Navy. He didn't have one eye, he lost an arm, he lost most of his teeth. But worst of all, he had a very public affair with someone else's wife while he himself was married. But then the times were different. Britain was obsessed with the thought of Napoleon's invasion of Britain. And Napoleon was one big character they had to fight. And the country, the Admiralty, the service all found Captain Nelson, who had already caught the imagination of the public, to be shown as that counter for Napoleon. So he was a national hero. So it was not easy to get him. So now Nelson had all these factors going for him. The Nelson that the Franco-Spanish fleet saw at Trafalgar was born because of all this. What was Nelson's luck? Nelson's luck was that his service, the service that he functioned in, and the country to which the service belonged, were all focused on the core job of the Navy, that is war fighting. Any organization, any country, any person who takes his eyes off the core job suffers. And the example for this is given by the British themselves. Because of the victory of 1805, the British Navy became the uncrowned kings of the world, of the oceans. And Britain, after the Napoleonic Wars ended, became the world's unchallenged superpower. Then came the Victorian era. From 1805 to 1914, the British fleet didn't have to fight any fleet action. And Britain didn't have any major wars. During the Victorian era, Britain had peace, they had absence of war. They had industrial revolution at its peak. They had political stability, and they ruled the empire on which the sun never set. So they had peace, they had prosperity, they had technology, and they had political stability. This is the best combination that any country can ask for. But the net result was that when the First World War came, the British Navy had transformed in the opposite direction. They were very good at everything except fighting, their core job. Now that is what peace does, the absence of the core job does to any organization or any person or any country. Absence of an opportunity to do the core job changes organizations. There are studies which classify officers into authoritarians and autocrats. Another study calls it regulators and rat catchers. Authoritarians or regulators are very good at running day-to-day jobs, where they just go by tradition and they just continue to do the same things the same way. And autocrats or rat catchers are problem solvers. They may not follow tradition, but in case of trouble, they are the ones who can solve problems, and they are the ones who are unconventional. Any organization that is focused on its core job will covet the presence of unconventional people, because they are the ones who can question the status quo. They can come up with new solutions, ask new questions. Like everyone else, I have also coveted unconventionality all my life. But whether I turned out to be unconventional while in service is not for me to judge, it is for those who were with me to judge. However, there is one episode I would like to convey. It is in 2007 when I was doing the war course, the Navy war course at the Naval War College. We had a three-day session with late Vice Admiral Hiranandani, who retired as the Vice Chief of the Indian Navy and who was the Fleet Operations Officer of the Western Fleet of the Indian Navy during the Indo-Pakistan 1971 war. After he heard one of my talks, which was analyzing some part of the service, he made this statement from the podium. He said, "Son, I hope you continue to speak with the same fervor all your life. Let me assure you, it will get you nowhere." But he said, that look, we get our best medals are given to us by ourselves. And you, I'm sure, will get a lot of good medals from yourself. So that is my message to my young audience and any other young audiences who might listen to this talk. This world is changing. The world has already changed, and the rate of change is faster with every generation. Today, with climate change, with the effect of cyber, with artificial intelligence, with political systems bursting at the seams, with faiths and many other forces pulling us back into medieval thought processes, it's a challenging world out there. So that is a good time to avoid flowing with the wind or swimming with the tide. This is the time to ask questions, to be creative. It's rewarding. Unconventionality is rewarding. It's refreshing. And what's the fun is that even if you try and you lose, it's still great fun because you would be very proud that you have tried something new. Unconventionality is a fantastic asset, and that's a wonderful trait to have in your lives. Thank you very much.